The mother of this hobbit, of Bilbo Baggins that is, was the famous Belladonna Took, one of the 3 remarkable daughters of the old Took, head of the hobbits who lived across the water, the small river that ran at the foot of the hill. It was often said, in other families, that long ago one of the Took ancestors must have taken a fairy wife. That was, of course, absurd, but certainly there was still something not entirely hobbit-like about them, and once in a while, members of the Took clan would go and have adventures. They discreetly disappeared, and the family hushed it up. But the fact remained that the Tooks were not as respectable as the Bagginses, though they were undoubtedly richer. Hello friends, and a very happy Hobbit Day 2020 to you. I do hope this video finds you well, and brings you some happiness today. And allow me to wish a very happy birthday to Bilbo and Frodo Baggins, our Hobbit heroes of renown. Today I wanted to take a special one-off look at the family of Bilbo's mother, the esteemed Tooks of Tuckborough. This being my first proper foray into Third Age material, and on Bilbo's birthday no less, it seems appropriate to me to take a look today at the family which the Hobbit most often tells us that his sense of adventure derives from. Like the closely related Brandybucks, the Tooks were a family that were mainly descended from the Fallowhide ethnic group. The Fallowhides were fairer of skin and of hair than either the Stors or the Harfoots, and on average taller and slimmer than other Shire folk. They were known for their love of trees and woodlands, as well as their adventurous spirit. The records of the Tooks begin in the year 2340 of the Third Age, almost 7 centuries before the War of the Ring, when Gorhendad Oldbuck abdicated the Thainship of the Shire in order to cross the River Brandywine and establish Buckland, there building Brandy Hall. The Thainship then passed to Isambras Took I, who became the 13th Thane after the 12 generations of Oldbucks who had preceded him. The office of the Thainship became a hereditary position, which passed down the male line to each patriarch of the Took family, so that the Thane was often just referred to as the Took. In 2683, Thane Isengrim Took II began construction of Great Smiles, the ancestral home of the Tooks ever after. Isengrim was the grandfather of Bandobras Took, who was better known as the Bullroarer, one of the greatest heroes in Hobbit history. Aside from being unusually tall and strong for a Hobbit, he was famous for leading the Hobbits against a band of marauding goblins in the Battle of Greenfields in the year 2747 of the Third Age, where he personally slew the goblin leader. The goblins had managed to slip past the Dunedain Rangers of the North, the remnants of the men of Númenor of the Northern Kingdom who were guarding the Shire at the time, though the hobbits knew it not. According to local legend, Bandobras took the goblin leader Golfimble's head clean off with a club during the battle, and then it flew through the air for 100 yards and landed in a rabbit hole. Thus was the game of golf invented, and so named. You've probably heard that fact before. Afterwards, the Bullroarer had many descendants living in Long Cleave, a place name which was presumably also named for the Bullroarer's killing blow in the battle. And these were known as the North Tooks, though nothing more is recorded of his line. We do know that Pippin would later marry Diamond of Longcleave, who was possibly a descendant of the Bullroarer, and therefore a distant cousin. The Took line went down through the Bullroarer's brother, Ferumbras II. In November of the year 2758 began the Long Winter, which saw war break out in the south, with an invasion of the Dunlendings hitting Rohan, and fleets of the Corsairs of Umbar hitting Gondor along the coast. The Long Winter lasted 5 months, ending in March the following year, and in the Shire it resulted in the deaths of many thousands of hobbits. This was when Gandalf the Grey first took an interest in the plight of the hobbits, and in particular, here began his long association with the Took family. As Gandalf will later recall to Pippin, "And then there was the Shire folk. I began to have a warm place in my heart for them in the Long Winter, which none of you can remember. They were very hard put to it then, one of the worst pinches they have been in, dying of cold and starving in the dreadful dearth that followed. But that was the time to see their courage and their pity one for another. It was by their pity as much as their tough, uncomplaining courage that they survived. I wanted them to survive." Ferumbras II's grandson was Gerontius Took, better known as the Old Took. Gerontius was Bilbo's grandfather on his mother's side, and a local legend in his own right. The Old Took, who died at the age of 130, was the oldest hobbit in recorded history, until Bilbo surpassed him just before sailing west from the Grey Havens. Gandalf further continued his association with the Tooks during this time. He once gave a pair of magic diamond studs to the Old Took that fastened themselves and never came undone until ordered to do so. 2 of Gerontius's sons, Hildifons and Isengard, were amongst those hobbits who went off for adventures at Gandalf's bidding. And it was then also that Gandalf first met the young Bilbo, who caught the eye of the wizard when he used to pester Gandalf for the stories of his uncle's adventures, and other news of the wider world. Interestingly, the Thane was not always also the head of the Took family, as in the case of Lalia Clayhanger, who was the mother of Fortinbras Took II, who was the Thane during the disappearance of Bilbo during the events of The Hobbit. Lalia remained the senior head of the Took family at this time, while her son took the male-only position of Thane, which was, in times of need, a military position, as well as a ceremonial one. After Bilbo's return from the quest of Erebor, during the years leading up to the War of the Ring, the Thainship later passed to Paladin Took II, the great-grandson of the Old Took. When Paladin's son Peregrine Took, better known to us as Pippin, left the Shire with Frodo on the quest of the Ring, changes started to happen in the Shire at an alarming rate. Changes which Paladin and the Tooks were the first to resist, after Lotho Sackville Baggins declared himself Chief of the Shire, a title which Paladin took umbrage to as the legitimate Thane. The Tooks holed up in great smiles and shot dead any of Lotho's ruffians who entered their territory, becoming the centre of a local resistance movement. When Pippin and his friends returned from the quest of the Ring, having been the heroes of many great deeds in the war, Pippin was able to liberate his ancestral home and recruit an army of around 100 Tooks for the Battle of Bywater against Sharkey's men, the first battle to be fought in the Shire since Paladin and Peregrine's ancestor Bandobras almost 300 years beforehand. The battle marked the final end of the War of the Ring. When his father died several years later, Pippin took over the title of Thane of the Shire. The legacy of the Tooks went on well into the Fourth Age, when Great Smiles became famous for its library, with possibly the greatest collection of historical texts and lore in the Shire, likely rivalled only by Bag End. Pippin maintained his friendship with King Elessar, his old travelling companion Strider, and with his friends Samwise, who was elected Mayor of Mitchell Delving, and Merry, who became the Master of Buckland, they were appointed as councillors of the North Kingdom, and important advisors to the king. Pippin was survived by his son Thane Faramir Took I, named for the steward of Gondor and later Prince of Ithilien. Pippin, along with his best friend Merry, who it should be mentioned was also half Took on his mother's side, was given the honour of being laid to rest next to the king. In my next video, which will be coming sometime within the next week, we will discuss my recommended Tolkien reading list ahead of the new Amazon Prime TV show. Following that, we will have our promised Silmarillion Explained retrospective, where we look back at the events of the first 9 chapters that we've covered in the book so far. This video is part of a playlist of special magnificence. Click the thumbnail to check out the work of some of my talented colleagues.